So hello from Green-Mopeds in London. So today we're looking at a new bike from a company called NewBot, and this is their top of the range bike. This is called the Storm S. There's another model which is slightly less in spec called a Storm, and we're putting it next to this merely for context in size, not for technical specification, because they are pretty much no way comparable. But we'll do what we normally do. We'll go around the bike, show you some of the features, and hopefully that will help you make an informed decision. So let's get to it. So a little bit about NewBot themselves. So NewBot are out of China. This isn't their top of the range bike. This is just the top of the Storm range bike. This is the Storm S. They also have another one called a Hurricane. They also do mopeds. They also do scooters. They say they do about 5,000 bikes a day, or orders a day, so obviously a formal production process. And they say by 2030, they're going to have 100 different models. So quite ambitious, and obviously a formal production process. So these are going through a factory rather than, say, for example, the Crash Z8X, which is an alternative to this in some respects, which is a sort of hand-built bike. Okay, so as I said, I'm putting it next to a TC Max really to give you some sort of perspective of size. So a lot of the Chinese bikes are relatively small. So this one is still a two-seater. This is your sort of two-seat space, and as you can see on the Storm S, you've actually got, a proper rear seat for a passenger. You might be able to tell it's about over 2 meters long, this bike, and compared to a TC Max, so they are lined up. Okay, so it's bigger all round. It's got bigger profile tyres, although 17-inch wheels, quite an aggressive look to the front of it, sort of superbike style, if you like. Starting at the front, we've got, as I said, 17-inch wheels, ABS as an option here. Okay, so all 125cc equivalent bikes, which this still is a 125cc equivalent, have to have either CBS, as in this case here, 2 cables going in and out the front caliper, and when you squeeze the right-hand brake, you get a shared amount of energy going to stop the rear wheel as well as the front wheel. This one is going to have ABS, so you have to have one or the other. So yes, this is a 125cc equivalent bike, so it can be ridden on a CBT with L plates. Its top speed, maximum speed, is 93. Okay, TC Maxes are more like 60. Its sort of consistent speed, they're quoting as 80. Okay, so still good enough for national speed limits and motorways, although obviously if you're going in onto a motorway, you would need to have the appropriate license to do that. Okay, so 175 kilos, which is a bit weighty, I suppose. TC Max is, with the battery loaded, because it's a removable battery obviously, is about 120. The Storm and Storm S do not have a removable battery. Okay, they have either a 7.2 kilowatt hour battery down here, as you can see. It's got prismatic cells in it, which are the sort of matchbox size cells, not the 18650s or 21700 cells. Prismatic cells, and it's either 102 amp hours on the Storm S, giving you 7.2 kilowatt hours, or 6.2 kilowatt hours on the Storm. Okay, so the Storm is 6 kilowatt max. The TC Max is 5 kilowatt max. This one is 11 kilowatt max. Okay, so well below the threshold of a 125cc equivalent bike. Okay, so a 125cc equivalent bike can have up to, well, a power, continuous power limit of 11 kilowatts. This is 8 kilowatts, so well beneath the spec required to make it a higher rated bike in terms of license. Okay, so it's still a 125cc bike. Okay, so going around it a bit more, as you can see from the front, if you like that sort of styling, then this could be one of the bikes for you. Okay, so to look at the dash, let me just turn this off and turn it on again so you can see the startup sequence. Okay, so it'll be easier to explain this when you're actually doing the ride review, but essentially, here's your state of power. You're going to have energy going in and out, etc., etc. Around the dash itself, you've got a reverse, which is possibly a bit more useful on a bike like this, being heavier. You've got hazards, 3 modes, a single master cylinder, you see here, because it's got a rear foot brake. Okay, you could put your mirrors back onto the handlebars if you want, but one of the sort of interesting things it does is when you turn on the indicators, they are silent, but you get that in the mirror. So a visual clue that the indicators are on rather than an audible one. Okay, so you've got standard features here. There's your power button to enable the throttle. You've got your lights, etc., and that's about it. Standard stuff. On the tank, if you go for the Type 2 charging, you've got your Type 2 charging socket and a metal tank, which is a first for the bikes that we do anyway. Okay, so going around a bit more, so you've got your pegs for the rear passenger, and you've got a QS motor. Okay, so QS are pretty well known for motors, possibly not as well known as Bosch, but they are used quite a lot in electric motorbikes. They say this is a custom designed motor rather, but 11 kilowatts is still pretty powerful. It could, in a 125cc equivalent bike, it could go, I mean the Z8X has 19 kilowatts, so they could have essentially gone for more power, but you have to remember that this is heavy. On a Z8X, for example, the 19 kilowatt motor weighs 24 kilos. Okay, so eventually you don't really want to hang such a big motor off the rear wheel, especially when it's spinning at 80 miles an hour. Okay, so what a lot of the big bikes do, or more powerful bikes do, they then move from a hub motor to a centrally mounted one. But obviously then you lose the capacity or the space to have a larger battery. So that's why they sometimes choose hub still over centrally mounted. It's a sort of trade-off between battery versus motor. Okay, so around the back you've got sort of quite a nice design here as well. Okay, and again you've got ABS on the back there. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about TC Max simply because, as I said, it's not really comparable. So in terms of range, bearing in mind it's got a 7.2 kilowatt hour battery, just as a comparison, the TC Max has a 45 amp hour battery. This has a 102 amp hour battery. Okay, so just to give you some sort of context. So in terms of range, in city mode, they're saying 124 miles, which is quite a lot, obviously. Normally we knock off 20%. So if you do that, you're down to sort of like 90 miles city, which is, I guess, believable. Then at 50 miles an hour, they quote 84 miles, which is, again, knock off 20%. You're talking about 60, which again is believable, I suppose. Then at highway, so 70 miles an hour, you're talking about 60 miles. This is quoted range, so up to. So we're talking there more like something to do with 45-mile range. And then at 80 miles an hour, they're quoting 53 miles. So that's more like 40 miles. So sort of believable, I guess. Charging time, if you use the fast charging option, you've got 6 hours. Okay, so Type 2 charging, so you would actually have to have a Type 2 charger available for that, 16 amp. Okay, obviously fixed battery, so that's your choice. It can do 13 amp charging as well if you wish, but I would suggest that if you're going for a bike like this, you would go for Type 2. Okay, in terms of colours, in case that's of interest, you have 2 choices basically. There was a green, but they're not bringing that one in to the UK. There's a black and a red. Okay, and then prices are sort of still being finalised, but it should be about £9,500. So I should have said probably at the beginning, why are we considering this bike? And it's because we always look for gaps where we are not meeting a requirement or where there is no bike that meets a requirement. So currently, from the bikes that we do, other than the Z8X, most of the bikes that we do that are motorbike style are, well, your choices are a TC Max, the Vogue ER10, the CR6, TC Wanderer, a little bit less power. But essentially Vogue, the ER10, is stopping. For the moment at least. It might come back, but currently it's stopping, so that choice is gone. The CR6 is also probably stopping, so that choice is gone as well. and the ZAX is, we're talking about over £10,000 now. And there is a gap between a 60-mile-an-hour bike and then zeros, which is, you're talking 12,000 plus. Okay, so this bike is aimed right in the middle. It's more powerful, goes faster, should go further than something like a TC Max, but it's not price-wise anything like a zero. Okay, so this is sort of more of an upgrade from people who are riding TC Maxes and CR6s to the next level without having to go up to something like a zero. Okay, so that's really the gap that it's filling. And of course, this is into city commuting from, you know, Surrey, West London, South London, or where you have, you know, a decent road that you have to go down, A3, A24, etc., etc. Okay, so currently it's not on the grant. They're looking at that. Obviously, if you want to do a test ride yourself, and we will be doing a ride review as we normally do, then please feel free to contact us. Hopefully that's helped you in your research. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Green-Mopeds, and thanks very much.